Hello everyone. Today I'm going to do a what-if scenario for what I find most interesting of each of the 13th colonies and make an alternative theory for each one. I hope you like it and enjoy. Virginia. Good old Virginia. There is a lot to love about Virginia. Great food, great people, great beaches, and a rich history, one of which you must know to death by this point. Yes, I'm talking about Jamestown. It was the first successful colony in America by the English that became the foundation of English colonization, which would one day create the modern United States. But the colony wouldn't have survived if it wasn't thanks to its tobacco-driven economy at the time, which was the only way the colony generated money and its main export. Good sweet old tobacco, a crop that has influenced English colonization, especially in the South, before cotton ever became profitable for almost 200 years, from the 1610s all the ways until the 1800s. It all starts in that small settlement that we now call Jamestown by a bunch of investors that wanted to find gold, found themselves in trouble with the Powhatan, and the colony faced trouble until John Smith successfully managed to keep control. Eventually, John Rolfe tobacco crop that he brought from Bermuda saved the colony, as they had a reliable cash crop and a main source of income for the colony that would then bring more investors and settlers to come and settle all throughout of what would soon be the 13th colonies, and then America. But here's the question: what if they did found gold? But first, some context, and by that I mean a lot of context.
Oh, that's not so much. So?
If you don't have time, just skip to the theory. What were the incentives to go to Virginia? The Virginia Company in London was given a charter by King James I to settle anywhere between what's modern-day North Carolina and New York, and called the area Virginia. Their initial motivation for the expedition was to extract gold and silver from Virginia. The Spanish success in finding gold and silver deposits in Mexico and especially Peru inspired the merchants to do the same, with the Virginia Company wanting to reward its investors for funding the expedition. It also had ambitions to find a water route into the Pacific, similar to Portugal and Spain, to enter Asian markets and trade with the Orient, but did not know the region well as of yet. The journey to Virginia. The expedition set sailed from England on December 20th, 1606, with 105 men on board. It was led by Captain Christopher Newport to pick a location that wasn't under Spanish control, yet safe from Spanish attack. For this reason, he sailed into Chesapeake Bay and sailed 50 miles inland into what is now the James River, into a low-lying, marshy peninsula. They set their town there, disembarked, and established the town as Jamestown. The colonists opened a black box and found 6 people who would run the governing council. Bartholomew Gosnold, one of the behind-the-scenes initiators of the Virginia Company. Edward Maria Wingfield, a major investor. John Ratcliffe, captain of the Discovery. George Kendall. John Martin, the Armenian, and the man of the hour himself, Captain John Smith. A former mercenary who had fought in the Netherlands in 1597 and in Hungary in 1601. Edward Maria Wingfield would be president and run the colony. There was accusation from Wingfield of Smith starting a mutiny, and he was kicked out of the council, though not for long, as he would be brought back 3 weeks later. The colonists had cleared some land and began to create palisades for protection, and made rude fundamental shelters, and started to plant crops. The natives who lived there, led by the Powhatan, treated the colonists was quite mixed with. On one hand, the natives would provide them food. On other occasions, they traded with one another, with the colonists providing metal tools in exchange for foodstuffs with the natives. That didn't mean things were peaceful, as there were clashes from time to time with some colonists being killed if they ventured too far from their fort. Newport led an expedition on May 21, 1607, to further explore the rivers across the Chesapeake Bay with 22 men along with John Smith. When he returned, they got attacked by the natives, most likely Powhatan. But they survived, due to them using their ship's cannons to give support to the colonists in the fort. Newport left to England on the 22nd of June to give a good report to the Virginia Company. However, things were not fine. The English began to pay less attention to planting crops and more to exploring the region for quick riches. They did this so much that they ignored their responsibilities and didn't have enough food and water due to them not build enough fresh water wells or food stores. By August 1607, they were suffering from all types of issues like food shortages, waterborne illnesses from drinking bad drinking water from the James River, and mosquito-related diseases. They suffered from dysentery and high fevers as a result. So many people died or were out of shape that only 6 able-bodied men were around, and they replaced Wingfield with Ratcliffe on September 10th. Newport returned in early January in 1608 with more supplies and able hands, but then a fire occurred not long after in the living quarters of the colony and basically made the colonists more dependent on the natives. The power struggle to maintain Jamestown. Despite being there for years, their primary goal was still to find gold for the company, and the colonists were essentially mining for gold in the river banks. It was so important that Newport brought 2 gold refiners and 2 goldsmiths. Disgruntlement over Ratcliffe wanting to build a large structure for governance pissed off everyone else, and he was replaced by John Smith in September 10, 1608. John Smith took control, taking the reins with him, proclaiming, "He that will not work shall not eat, except by sicknesses or if disabled." The colony improved with no deaths related to starvation during his leadership, and they suffered minimal losses overall. But in May 23, 1609, the king made a new royal charter which replaced the idea of a council or president with a governor instead. The company chose a man named Thomas Gates, who sailed around June with 9 ships, but his ship got shipwrecked somewhere in Bermuda due to a hurricane, and those who made it demanded John Smith step down. He refused, but reluctantly agreed, but only till the end of his term. In the end, he got stripped of his leadership early and got in a gunpowder accident shortly after sailing back to England to recover in September. He was replaced by a man named George Piercy.
What are you doing in there, Patrick?
Wouldn't you like to know?
And why's that bag on your head?
Why? Oh, no reason. Except you gave me the ugly!
Around autumn 1609, the chief Powhatan Wahunsenakaw began a campaign to starve the colonists by no longer bartering with them and killing those who left the fort. The colonists starved, with the colonists resorting to cannibalism, with some escaping. On May 24, 1610, 2 ships called the Deliverance and the Patience arrived with Thomas Gates and Admiral George Sumner, arriving to see the colony a mess. They didn't have enough food for themselves and the colonists that remained in the fort, so decided to leave. But as they sailed, they ran into Thomas West, who was the 12th Baron of the war, and he basically said, but I'm paraphrasing here,
"Look at me, sure. Look at me, sure. I'm the captain now."
With cannons pointed at their ships if they dared to return back to England. He brought in 150 new settlers, ample provisions, and took control of the colony himself. West demanded a return of tools and bringing in an Indian who killed an Englishman to be handed to them to do justice, which Powhatan chief refused. Tensions flared, with West forced to leave due to suffering from diseases, leaving Virginia in March 1611, making Jamestown worse off in terms of diplomatic relations with the Powhatan and surrounding tribes. Good fortunes reaching Jamestown. A mariner in 1613 named Samuel Argall, who was sailing up the Potomac to find corn when he ran into and became friends with a chief named Japazuis, who ran the Patawomeck tribe on the Potomac River, which was beyond Padua control. Samuel found out Padwa's daughter was with Japazis and decided to kidnap her to ransom her in exchange for English prisoners along with their tools. He managed to convince Japazus to intervene and cooperate with the Padwa. The colonists got 7 colonists back from Wahansanakaw, but he refused to compromise further. Because of this, Pocahontas was relocated to an outpost named Henricus, which is in modern-day Richmond, founded in 1611 by Sir Thomas Dale and was the second settlement in Virginia. She then converted to Christianity and married John Rolfe, a tobacco planter.
Hello, Johnny!
In April 1614, which brought peace between them and the natives, being named the Pocahontas Peace, which lasted from 1614 until March 22, 1622, where a coordinated attack led by Opchanacano occurred due to the colonists expanding thanks to tobacco planting, requiring more farmland. Rolfes experimented with tobacco by replacing native Virginia tobacco with more palatable tobacco from the West Indies, and raised a product that can compete with Spanish tobacco. He sent his barrels to England in 1614 with other colonists copying him, and it became a chief crop that they would produce to sell to England. Jamestown was finally becoming profitable. To me, this has a lot of historical significance, as the colony's initial goal was to find gold and not settle the land to grow tobacco. Only through sheer lack of luck on the part of the settlers and investors' inability to find gold in the area, and not very good with manual labor, did the settlers switch towards something that proved way more profitable, changing the colony's sources of revenue. The only reason that it even happened was because they got lucky at every term and weren't all wiped out by the natives, disease, starvation, or eating themselves.
Nom, 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 nom.
It was only through sheer determination of their leaders to keep the venture going that it ultimately succeeded, and they managed to pull through when John Rolfe came into the picture. But why is this so important? The reason why this is so important is that brings a particular question. How would the colony look like and evolve if there was gold to be found in the area during its initial stages? How would this change the trajectory of the colony? Would Jamestown attract more people to settle the region, or would there be less due to the dangers that come with settling such a vast world? The reason I ask is because there is gold in Virginia, but deeper inland in Fairfax County to Buckingham and Halifax County, called the Gold Pyron Belt, and the navigable rivers bring them close to the area. John Rolfe was in the same expedition as Thomas Gates and George Sumner on the sea venture that capsized in 1609 and survived. The crew that survived stayed there for 10 months and managed to build 2 ships, the Patience and the Deliverance, and sailed back to Jamestown. It's even where he got his tobacco seeds from. What if John Rolfe was unlucky and died during the hurricane or fell into the sea when they capsized? He isn't able to grow and develop the tobacco seeds that he brought from the West Indies, and it could take years before anyone else has that same idea, if it even occurs to them at all, since the primary motivation for coming into the colony was still related to gold. And let's be honest, many of settlers there were not that smart. With John Rolfe gone and expeditions for gold continue, it's possible that they will eventually find gold as Nime. Samuel Argall is friends with the chief leader of the Patawomek and reside in the Potomac River. The Gold Pyron Belt does go through the Potomac as well, so it's likely that given enough time, the Patawomek are likely able to assist the colonists find what they're looking for, in exchange for finished products or something, or mine it themselves to barter with the colonist. They could easily bypass the Padwa and their allies and essentially encircle them, building outposts while they extract gold. Perhaps the slaves that are brought in 1619 are brought to the Pyron Gold Belt through the Potomac to mine gold instead of growing tobacco. Despite this access to gold, there would not be enough gold to make it profitable long term, and would probably give up by the mid-1620s. But the Potomac is also rich in fish. The environment is similar to that of Jamestown and more inland than the James River, with a larger river that is capable of allowing larger ships to dock. A sister colony could be formed by the Potomac in what's modern-day Washington, D.C., or Alexandria, Or maybe a town named Argylsburg, named after Argyll, or something that could rival Jamestown early on, and likely supersede it given its higher advantages. The 30 Years' War is also likely to bring new colonists to the New World, but in this case they will go to this alternative sister colony more so than Jamestown. It would also very likely sour relations with the Potawatomi pretty quickly, but hey, it's the 17th century, so who cares? The colonists definitely don't. More development would occur in near the Potomac than land surrounding the James River. But what if there was a lot of gold that was easier to access? If there is a lot of gold in the Piron Gold Belt, it could completely change the economy of the area and the demographic. As Jamestown slowly becomes abandoned, as more people go to this fictional Argylsburg and settle near the gold sites in the area, similar to the gold rushes of the 1800s. However, unlike other gold rushes, the Virginia Company is more likely to monopolize the area, since it doesn't benefit as much from allowing too many settlers to mine the area for themselves, or at least only in the short term. The colony's development changes and slavery increases. It's also very likely that this alternative Argylsburg will rely on slavery even more, since trusting indentured servants with the gold would be too risky, as they would have too many rights, and more likely to flee with the gold and get away. A slave wouldn't be able to, as they would have even less knowledge of the area, and they would stand out due to their skin color. Slavery could actually be worse, as they would be forced to mine the gold in very harsh conditions, and it would get harder by the decade, as mining gold you have to go deeper. Slavery could begin much sooner with slave codes written much more earlier than before, and the colony will likely be operated through gold mining for decades, with settlers, prospectors trying to get rich on one end and slaves in another. There likely wouldn't even be representative democracy occurring like with the House of Burgesses, since most settlers would only come to the colony to get rich and then go home. Or you were probably a slave or an indentured servant who already had little rights, with indentured servants being phased out sooner and ultimately switching to importing slaves. The colony would still likely develop a tobacco-driven economy, but for the first few decades its primary focus would be on gold extraction, most likely shifting gears in the 1640s or 1650s, once all the easy gold is extracted and the cost becomes more expensive. The only winner here is going to be the natives, as since Pyrite Gold Belt isn't that big in terms of land area, and while there will be scattered mining facilities spread out anyway, it is not going to be the same as them dealing with tobacco plantations. It's very likely that while hostilities with natives may occur, the natives will negotiate with the Virginia Company to allow them to mine gold in their area, as long as they don't plan to settle near their agricultural lands or hunting grounds, which if they are primarily focused with extracting metals, they are not going to care as much and might set up outposts to trade with the natives. It's even possible that natives participate in the slave trade by bringing escaped slaves back to white slave owners for commodities like metal tools, alcohol, and textiles.
Oh dear, I seem to have spotted a cut!
However, that would not be the case for other natives, such as those who live nearby the Carolina Slate Belt, other colonial ventures. With the success of finding gold, it is very likely the Crown and investors would send more expeditions hoping to find more gold deposits, with proprietors trying to get a claim into the suspected vast lands that is overflowing with gold. As they venture forth, they find the Carolina Slate Belt, which, if we want to be less realistic, has a lot of gold. And just like Virginia, Carolina would also have their boom towns with gold miners and prospectors. A boom can occur here with settlers and slaves settle all around the belt wherever they can, since the mines are more spread out and it's bigger. Here there will be more tensions between the natives and the colonists as the settlers everywhere building forts, harbors, farms, and towns all around. These gold rushes would last decades, from the 1620s to 1640s in Virginia, and from the 1640s to 1660s in southern Carolina, with the gold boom ending by the 1680s in Georgia. It's very likely tobacco plantations are set up anyway by then, but with an even more wealthy planter class, if they also happen to be those who got wealthy from the gold extraction, with slave codes likely already set in place and indentured servants becoming not worth it anyway. The colony would develop faster, but in the end, slavery would be worse and wealth inequality even more absolute for everyone else. Thanks everyone, I hope you guys like it and subscribe. Please comment on what I missed and what I got wrong. Thank you very much. Out.